Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Here we talk to the key players at PETA and the movement and ask them about how animal rights change their lives and how they stay motivated to make the world a better place for animals. To kick things off, we talked to PETA president and co-founder Ingrid Newkirk. In episode 1, she talked about her dog Shawnee and how he changed her life. In episode 2, we talked to PETA General Counsel Jeff Kerr about PETA's involvement in the famed monkey selfie case of Naruto. In our last episode, we talked about how the Iditarod is starting up soon and how whistleblowers are exposing the cruelty involved in that famous race. Check out our links to those episodes in our podcast player on PETA.org or wherever you podcast. And incidentally, because we're really just beginning, don't forget to check us out on iTunes. Please rate and review. It helps spread the word that PETA has a podcast talking about the issues you care about. Now, one of the things people don't realize is how PETA's effort is a global one. And today we talked to a woman who headed up the office in India before transferring to the UK. PETAPoorvaJoshipura is Vice President of International Affairs for the PETA Foundation UK. Born in America to South Asian Indian immigrants, she went back to India and headed up the office there. And that's where we began our conversation, as she talks about how cows aren't so sacred as you may think in India, and how PETA is fighting to stop a cruel activity called Jallikattu. And we talk about how Purva's work in India attracted protest where she was burned in effigy, and yet it's only made her stronger in her fight for the animals. Here's my conversation with PETA's Vice President of International Affairs for the PETA Foundation UK, PETAPoorvaJoshipura, on the PETA Podcast. Purva, not everyone is aware about PETA's international work, but really the scale of PETA is massive. And can you begin by telling us about PETA India and the work you did when you led PETA India?
Sure, I'd be happy to. PETA India, it started in 2000, and I've been lucky to be involved with the organization in various capacities really since that time. So for 18 years. And broadly speaking, PETA India works on the same sorts of issues as other PETA affiliates, focusing on where animals suffer the most on an industrial scale, such as in the meat industry or in laboratories, circuses, and for fashion and the like. But in India, we also work on issues which are India specific, like the chaining of elephants in temples or forcing animals to haul heavy sugarcane or bricks or other heavy material for various industries.
I mean, but really, when it comes to abuse and exploitation, wherever you are in the world, it's abuse and exploitation of animals.
Yes, it is. And one of our biggest campaigns there, just like PETA affiliates in the rest of the world, is to promote vegan eating. India has this reputation around the world for being vegetarian, for caring about animals, especially cows. But the reality is most Indians eat meat. And for families or communities that were traditionally vegetarian, before PETA India got there, young people were starting to adopt what they thought was a cool Western diet, eating meat, in other words, as a sort of rebellion to what they perceived as old religious or traditional ways.
Those darn teenagers, huh? Yeah, I mean, because when you mention the idea of the sacred cow not being a sacred cow, that's, I mean, to most Americans who are used to that, I guess it's a somewhat of a stereotype. It is kind of shocking to know that the cows aren't as sacred as they once thought.
Well, that's right. But, thankfully, because PETA India has been there, we've been successful at showing that plant-based eating is for everyone, not only Hindus who have a religious reverence for cows or Jains who have a religious reverence for animals, but Muslims and Christians and people of all religions and all backgrounds. And we've managed to do this by going inside slaughterhouses and dairy farms and exposing cruelties in India, for the very first time to that population.
And you've got an Indian name. You've worked all over the world for PETA, including India, but you're an American. And when you went there and you tried to tell these Indians what they should be doing, what kind of resistance did you get? And was it a problem?
Well, the first time I went to India, I went there off the back of an investigation PETA US had done of the Indian leather industry. This the investigation showed for the very first time, not only to people in India, but to people around the world, who were buying leather that originated in India, that to fuel this demand for leather, cows and buffaloes in India are crammed into vehicles in such high numbers that their bones break, that they're hacked apart with dull knives in front of each other while they're still alive. It's horrifying. It broke my heart. It broke the heart of just about literally everyone who saw this video, and that was in India, and that was also the reaction of people who saw this investigation around the world. So I think PETA started there with a bang, with this investigation. And I think it was really, eye-opening, for PETA, for the population in India. They had no idea, the same type of stereotype that, people around the world held, that cows are considered sacred there, that nobody does that to cows. That's really what a lot of people in India also thought. It was something that they had seen for the first time. It was the start of a trend toward people in India learning more and more about animals through PETA's investigations. That was in 2000.
Okay. And all right. So in 2000, you went there. The opposition you faced, how did that, I mean, was it angry? Was it, how did it make you feel as an American?
I mean, the opposition there, at the time in 2000 was really from industry. It was from industry that was, trying to sell leather. And, it's the same type of opposition that PETA often faces, around the world, from the meat industry or from circus industry, people trying to sell a product off the back of cruelty to animals. And that was the same kind of opposition that we really faced there. More recently, we've faced other types of opposition. For example, we have been working to stop a cruel spectacle called Jallikattu.
Jallikattu.
Yes, Jallikattu. It is a archaic gladiator-like event that is played in certain parts of the state of Tamil Nadu. During it, often drunken mobs of men gather together to torment bulls. The idea of the game is to terrify bulls so that they will run and they will appear fierce, though in reality they're just scared. And so when the bulls run, they run into spectators, they run into barriers, they break their own bones, they sometimes die, sometimes the spectators and the participants die. And we went to the Supreme Court in India to stop this. We did manage to stop it. It's now since resumed, but we did manage to stop it. We're now back in the Supreme Court. But we faced heavy opposition from people with gambling and other violent vested interests to see this spectacle continue.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, so people were actually gambling on who would get gored by the bulls, or because it sounds like a combination of the worst of bullfighting and the worst of Pamplona, huh?
Well, yes. I mean, it is sort of a combination of those two things. The difference here is that the bulls often die because they run into barriers, or they run into, they're so frightened from trying to run away from this violent mob of men that sometimes they run into wells, sometimes they run straight into a bus. Um, and so it is kind of a combination of those. And so people are betting on whether or not a person will be able to so-called tame a bull. And that's the object of the game.
Wow.
Of this.
And someone wins money, but people actually win money on bets like that? Or, I mean, it just seems odd.
It's illegal to gamble. Yes. I mean, it's sort of underground, gambling. But that's not the only illegal thing, about this, cruel event. It is illegal under Indian law to cause animals unnecessary suffering. And that was our argument in the Supreme Court, that this, cruelty violates Indian animal protection law. Because of, the bullying, of those who wanted to see this, spectacle continue, the government has currently relented, and they've allowed this, Jallikattu again. But we're back in the Supreme Court to try to change that.
So Jallikattu is Jallikatu. That's how it's spelled. It's not so jolly, this Jallikattu, huh?
Not at all. Many bulls break their bones. Many bulls die. Many humans do too, including participants, but spectators as well.
All right. Now, one of the things, though, I read is that as an advocate for the animals and being there for PETA, you were actually the object of rage and hate. I mean, I read where you were actually burned in effigy in India. I mean, that's like something that happens to, Uncle Sam, not to Purva, but you were burned in effigy.
Yes, I mean, most people in India are kind. I believe most people all around the world are kind. They just simply don't know. They haven't been informed what happens to animals for meat or for leather and laboratories and so on. But these particular men, who want to see Jallikattu continue, either because they make money off of it, because it's expensive to put on, there are people who earn money off of it, or because they earn money through gambling. These men are bullies. They bully the animals, and so it's not surprising that they tried to bully me for working to stop Jallikattu. If you encourage cruelty to animals in young people, and most of these men who take part are young men, you're encouraging a sort of disregard for another's life. You're encouraging and you're praising violence. So it's not so surprising that they tried to bully me, either, for working to stop Jallikattu. And I believe they especially did so because I'm a woman. There's no women who take part in Jallikattu. It's all men. They see it as a sort of bravery, but I really can't think of anything more cowardly than a gang of men getting together to chase a vulnerable animal.
Here you were, a woman, an American with an Indian name, trying to tell these men what to do. That must have really angered. I mean, that's got to be the source of the venom and the rage that was directed at you.
Yeah, their response was rape and death threats and all sorts of horrible things. Bullying, in other words. But if I wasn't, if I wasn't a woman, if I was somebody else trying to stop it, they would have been trying to bully that person too, because ultimately they want to continue to bully animals in order to make money, or to gamble. But people are waking up to this fact in India. Since Jallikattu has been allowed again, there have been dozens of people who've died during the Jallikattu events. The bulls have also died, many of them, but often their deaths go unreported. But because of the rising death toll of humans, the public there is starting to see that there's a connection between bullying animals, having a disregard for animal life, and having a disregard for human life too.
Now, how about the impact on yourself personally? I mean, if I was burned in effigy, that some people might say, "Hey, that might be good for your career, Emil." But I don't know if I actually saw a burning, uh, you know, facsimile of myself. I would say that's pretty frightening. How did you get through all that?
It was frightening. But I know that other women at PETA have faced challenges. And I had their bravery and the bravery of other PETA staff to look up to. And I had the support of people from PETA affiliates all around the world to get through that challenging time. And I believe kindness eventually prevails. When Ingrid is the person who had done the undercover investigation of the Indian leather trade. That's a male-dominated profession of people carrying knives. That wouldn't have been easy either. And so I took inspiration from other brave undercover investigations or other challenging tasks that others at PETA have taken on.
But did you ever, at one point, because I mean, this was some pretty violent stuff that you faced. Did it ever get to the point where you said, "It's not worth it. I got to think of my safety first"? Did it ever make you waver and think, I've reached my limit, or did it test you in a way to make you stronger? I mean, you're still talking to me. You're still with PETA, but tell me about those days. Tell me about those days. I mean, because I don't know if a lot of people listening or a lot of people that I know of would have had the kind of resolve to get to this point now where we can talk about it.
Well, PETA India was one of the only organizations that was fighting for these bulls, and we were certainly the leader in taking this charge against this violence to the animals. And so we simply had to do it. And no matter how uncomfortable I was, I knew that those bulls were even more uncomfortable. And so having colleagues who had been part of the investigations of what happens to those animals, knowing that those animals will be year after year deliberately disoriented with alcohol, as they are, deliberately jabbed and stabbed with sickles, spears, and knives, or having their tails broken. All of these things are done to agitate them and force them into this violent mob that awaits them. Someone has to do it. And it wasn't just me alone. We had a team. We have a very strong team in India that's still fighting for these bulls. And so together, I suppose we just got through it. I've had a little bit of practice being in other uncomfortable situations, having done investigations for PETA India in the past. So I'm not entirely a stranger to being uncomfortable.
Now tell me about your parents. Your parents immigrated from India, came to America. You were born in America. You're of Indian ancestry, but you returned to India. You find yourself in this situation. What did your parents say to you? Because they're back in the United States, right? And they're probably saying, my daughter Purva come home, burned in effigy. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Did your parents what was their reaction?
My father had the most surprising reaction. It was very unexpected. My dad, he came to the U.S. in 1969, to advance his studies from India. My mother in 1973. He was vegetarian when he was growing up in India, but eventually started eating meat, after coming to the States. But over time, I, became vegetarian as a teenager, became vegan when I was 20. And so, I shared why that is with my family. I didn't realize that over time they had become activists too. Because my father's reaction was, get out there and go get them. That's exactly what he said to me on a Skype call.
Yeah.
He said, congratulations to you on having, raised this issue, to this point for creating this discussion. Now you need to go and win it in the Supreme Court and end it. And so I had the support of my family, to carry on fighting for these animals. So that was a great thing. That was really nice to
Well,
hear.
and that had to just buttress you up and support you so much that nothing could stop you then, right? Your dad and your mom were giving you, you know, kudos, right, for standing up for in the land that they left, and you were going back there. That must have been.
It was touching. But none of this could have really happened without, none of the progress that we've made could have happened without, the staff that we have at PETA India. I'm not the one who's actually fighting this in court. I'm not a lawyer, but we have lawyers on staff there. We had an investigator, who goes out into, the field when Jellicatu is being played, or into, other places where animals are abused, circuses and so on, who gathers the evidence, and brings it back so that we can present it to the court and fight our case. So I've only been one part of that team. We have a much bigger team, working away, for the animals in India.
And you're saying that you're beginning to change minds there in India in terms of the industry, Jellicatu, at people's attitudes toward these old attitudes toward vegetarianism and the cows, and now it's coming back. There's not it seems like, is it a kind of it's almost, well, it would be a kind of a conservative move if that was the way India saw themselves, in that traditional way. But that must make you feel good that your work is doing something to bring back some of those values.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ingrid, Ingrid grew up in India, and, she often says that it is those values, that cultural reverence for animals, that religious, reverence for animals that's in India. Even though, most people in India eat meat, there is this cultural, reverence for animals there. And that's what she often credits to having inspired her to go on and then become the founder of PETA, affiliates all around the world. And I believe most people are genuinely kind, all around the world. Um, and it's really just that they hadn't known. They hadn't known what really happens to animals for meat or for leather and so on. And because these industries work so hard to hide the truth from consumers, it's sometimes hard to know. But thanks to PETA's campaigns and the work of, other activists and social media, people are seeing the undercover videos. They're hearing about the issues faster than they have ever before. Technology is ensuring that. And so there are millions more vegetarians in India today than there were in 2004. That's what the latest survey has said. And that's a
And,
wonderful thing.
and now you're no longer heading up the charge in India, as you are now Vice President of International Affairs for the PETA Foundation UK. You've been to all these other countries in India and Europe. What place gives you, I mean, let's take this in two parts. Now that you've seen the world from this perspective, where are the hot spots? Where are the areas that need help? And what countries or country gives you the most hope for real change? Just from your perspective as the VP of International Affairs for PETA.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as the VP of International Affairs, I'm lucky to actually still be involved in India. But I've also, have taken on duties for the UK, for other parts in Europe, and I've had the pleasure of also working for PETA in the US. So you're right. I have had a global view on this. I wouldn't really say that there's a country that I can pick out as the most hopeful. Rather, what I can say is that vegan eating seems to be taking the whole world by storm. Not only are there more people who are eating plant-based in India, in the UK, the number of vegans has risen by 360% in the last 10 years. In the US, vegan eating has grown by 500% since 2014. And that's really, one of the most effective things that anyone can do as an individual to help hundreds of animals, per year, is to go vegan. You can save an estimated nearly 200 animals a year just by not eating them. And so, we are seeing a rise in awareness of, the fact that calves are stolen from their mothers so that humans can steal the milk that was meant for them, or that male baby chicks are, killed in, horrific ways. In India, they're drowned or they're burned, because they're considered useless by the egg industry. We're seeing a rising awareness about this everywhere. And so I think that have a long way to go, but we're moving in the right direction around the world.
Now, you've done so many things for PETA. We've talked about undercover investigations. We talked about Jallikattu in India. You've also been very active as a protester. You were confined to a cage in Nairobi to demonstrate the plight of chickens killed for their flesh. You've done, you were jailed for disrupting a fashion show during New York Fashion Week. Is there one particular moment that stands out as, boy, I wish I could get jailed again like I did there in the Fashion Week, or I got to find another cage like in Nairobi to demonstrate. Or is there anything that you recall with fondness as, boy, that was a test of my animal rights, belief, and thank goodness I pulled through. Anything like that you can recall?
The thing that comes to mind is not so much a nice thing. The thing that I can recall that I wish I could do again, is going to, a slaughterhouse. The first slaughterhouse I ever went to was in Kolkata. And I wasn't able to film there because, it was too dangerous. And I just wish I could go back. And I did try to go back once, and I got chased away. But it was, one of the most horrifying things I have ever seen. And I just wish I could transfer what I saw in video and allow others to see. But I remember, the moment I entered, I saw this calf. So it was just a sort of big open area where animals were being cut up to death. And this calf was being pushed by several men to the slaughter floor. He tried his best to stand his ground. The men pushed him. They yanked him by the nose ropes, and eventually he didn't have the strength. And he fought as hard as he could, but he was pushed to the ground, and he fell with a thud, and his throat was cut. And I walked toward him while all this was happening. And I think it might be because of this personal experience I had with this calf that I wished I could do something for him.
What I was getting at is there one thing in your PETA career, from the being caged in Nairobi to being arrested, that just makes you think, boy, that was a key moment, or that was an important moment in my animal rights career. I'll never forget it. Or, something that makes you think about all the things you've done as an activist.
There's a wonderful happy moment that comes to mind. And that was when PETA India succeeded in getting cosmetics testing on animals banned in the country, and later as well as the import of animal tested cosmetics banned in the country. And the reason why this is so significant in my mind is because I know how much hard work went into achieving that. I was so proud of the scientist, the key scientist who was involved in this, that I actually cried while congratulating him, because I just know how much hard work it was. We got ourselves on the government committees where this was being discussed. We were in rooms full of people in industry who wanted to keep animal testing alive, even though Europe has banned it, even though it is clear that you don't need to test these products on animals. It was a hard fight. And the fight lasted for years. And so that's one moment that I can remember. And it just represents the tenacity and the fight that all of my colleagues at PETA around the world are willing to endure, that are willing to take on to win for the animals. As I was saying earlier, it's never about the one person. We're all working as a tight, fierce team.
And yet you are one person, and there's a personal side and a personal sacrifice that you have to go through in order to do this kind of work. And I just wonder sometimes, all right, now you were in India, you were first in the United States, then India, now you're in Europe, you're looking at all of the globe. What sustains you, that, as a human being, as a person, to say, yeah, I got to, I have this balance so that I can fight for the animals, but I can also live the life that I want to live? What is it that sustains you to say, yeah, it's worth it. Yes, I must go on. Yes, I will go on.
I think what's a worse situation to be in is to not do anything for the animals. That is the more depressing situation. Yes, I've seen some horrible things in slaughterhouses. Yes, I've been through some challenging times, but we are working on helping the animals who need us, and that really keeps you going. And it doesn't matter if you have 5 minutes in a day or you can dedicate more time. We can all do actions to help animals. And, whether it's not eating them or whether it's taking part in an action alert on PETA's website or sharing something on your Facebook, sharing a video. These are important steps to take to allow one to not be overcome by the depression of the state of animals, because we are winning victories. Apart from the vegan advocacy work that I was talking about that we do in India, and the cosmetics victory that I mentioned. We have rescued countless animals from circuses. We've, rescued elephants from lives of loneliness and chains, in temples. And everybody who takes part in Action Alerts, everybody, who donates to PETA, they're all part of, those victories. I think something else that has set the base for me to help animals, was growing up in the States. As an Indian person, I grew up in the South. I was the only Indian person, or Asian person, for what felt like miles around in the community that I grew up in. And so I faced racism. As a woman, I faced sexism. And it was really that helped me understand, or consider about speciesism. Because it's the same type of unfairness, that you're different, therefore you're lesser than me. That led me to understand that's the same type of logic we apply when we are willing to harm animals through what we eat or what we wear or our behaviors. And so it is partially because of what I faced when I was young, that I was able to vow to spend a life of helping others.
All right. One last question, Purva. You do this kind of work. It's so hard. It's a hard slog. You don't know when victories are going to come, but victories do come. But you live your life at the same time. What do you do for fun?
Oh, lots of things. Apart from eat vegan food, which, by the way, when I get off this call, I'm going to a French restaurant called Gautier, in London, which has a vegan tasting menu. So that's one thing I'm going to do for fun. But apart from that, I love to travel. I really enjoy, seeing other cultures. And I travel a lot for work, but I travel a lot otherwise too. I enjoy being able to see, learn about other ways of thinking, because it really helps, in campaigning as well. Not everybody reacts to information that's put out in the same kind of way. It has to be culturally, sensitive and culturally appropriate. I, love playing with all of the rescued animals that are in my life. Taking, my dog for walks, playing with my cats. I love reading. I love watching movies. I don't know.
Who's going to win the Oscar this year?
Oh, I have no idea who's going to win the Oscars this year.
How about your favorite pet? Your favorite companion animal?
I wouldn't say that I'm either a cat person or a dog person, one over the other. I think that I have two cats in my life and a dog, who all adopted me from the streets of India. And each one of them is distinct. Each one of them has their own unique personality. Not all cats are the same, not all dogs are the same, and they're just like people that way. So they have taught me a lot of things, and they've helped me get even more motivated to help those other animals who are not as fortunate as them, who are still out on the street in India, where it's a tough life, where they don't find enough food to eat, where they get hit by cars or abused by cruel people. And so they're kind of, in that indirect way, activists too. I'm very lucky to have the three of them in my life.
Purva Joshipura, Vice President of International Affairs for the PETA Foundation UK. Thank you very much for being part of the PETA podcast.
Thank you.
PETAPoorvaJoshipura, PETA's Vice President of International Affairs for the PETA Foundation UK. And that's our show. You can contact us at PETA.org. Don't forget to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. It'll help us reach more people and let them know why it's important to speak out and take action for the animals. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.